Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Reading Town Hall. I'm Professor Robert van der Rood, Vice Chancellor of the University of Reading, and it is a great pleasure to welcome you all tonight for what is hopefully going to be a very interesting evening. Now, I should tell you that tonight's event is being live streamed and recorded, and that means that lots of people can attend remotely and didn't have to travel here today. In the normal filming, no audience member will be in view, but please be mindful that if you ask questions, because the idea is that those who listen remotely hear your questions as well. So just so you're mindful of that. Now, tonight's event marks the finale of the Reading Climate Festival 2024, which over the past 2 weeks has seen events led by organizations and community groups from across Reading. I'd like to congratulate everyone involved in creating such an informative and inspiring festival that has engaged and empowered our community, both locally and further afield. The festival will provide a springboard for our community to work even more closely together to address the climate emergency. And tonight's talk will further highlight the urgency to do so. The discussion will be followed by an opportunity for live Q&A with the audience, which I encourage you to participate in before we close at 8:15. Now, when I travel around the world, people often ask me, well, what's that badge you're wearing? And I tell them this is the climate stripes. It shows the entire history of the planet's average temperature over more than a century and a half on a single badge. And it's designed to make conversation around climate change. Except, of course, increasingly, when I go around the world, people say, look, you have the climate stripes badge on. Where do you get it from? And then I tell them, well, actually, it comes from my own university. A climate scientist, colleague of mine, designed it. And I'm so proud that Reading, the town, the whole community, including the university, is increasingly recognized across the world as a center for climate study and understanding. And that is down to you, to all of you, the people of Reading, and through your schools and colleges and businesses and our councils. Our understanding of climate change is at higher levels now than ever before. But knowing about it is only the start. To make a difference, we have to all take action. And I'm very happy that's the theme of tonight's talk. How can we turn conversations about climate change tomorrow into action now to avoid the future catastrophe? Luckily, we have two of the country's best science communicators to answer that question. Please welcome Sky News Science and Technology Editor and Reading graduate and Honorary Doctor of Science, Tom Clarke, and climate scientist, Professor Ed Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Robert. Welcome, Ed. It's great to be back here as part of the Climate Festival in the Town Hall. And thanks everyone joining us here. It's a great crowd. Well done to everyone organising it and for you guys being here and for everyone online as well who's joining us at home. As Robert was mentioning, I was a graduate of Reading, but I was just reflecting on the way up here. When I was at Reading, I started here in 1991, and the building you're based in, meteorology, it wasn't really of much interest to me then. It was like, why would anyone study that? In fact, I didn't even know where the department was until I had a girlfriend who was in Bridges Hall. And I used to wander to that side of campus and occasionally stumble past it in the dark. And think, okay, it's just it's a feel. I don't know, is it going anywhere? It's the weather. And then I was reflecting, actually, just looking at the stripes, in fact, 1991, around that time, was where we started to see this big inflection point in average temperatures. And in fact, I've just had a quick look. I don't think since around then, roughly, we haven't seen a day, temperatures below the 1961 to 2010 average. That's when the world started warming up. And the work you do became a lot more interesting and important. And in fact, now whenever I come back to Reading, it's nearly always to go to that department to speak to Ed about climate science. And that's how we sort of got to know each other. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be here to talk to you now. Now, of course, and the image was about starting that conversation, and we hope to continue it here, but also find a lot about the origins of the stripes, the thinking behind it, and this incredible journey they've been on from something that was, just a little chart that you put out that's basically gone global, viral, and everywhere. And we're also going to be unveiling some exciting new uses of the stripes that are about to be launched soon, which I'm really excited about. And I think the most important thing, and I think this is why you came up with them, in turning this conversation into the action that we need to do something about climate science. But before we get started, let's see one example of how the stripes have been embraced in exciting new ways to talk about climate.
In a world swirling with storms, floods, fires, and extinction, we still believe that tomorrow must be better. But hope is no longer enough. We need visionaries with tenacity and knowledge, purpose, drive, and endeavour. Champions of progress and the world unite to show their stripes. These bars of red, scarlet, and crimson, an urgent warning of the warming still to come. A collaboration not through choice, but necessity. And never has it been so necessary.
Because we are causing this problem, through our burning of fossil fuels, we are causing the planet to warm, which means it is our choices which determine what happens next. That is down to us as individuals and society. And so we can take those decisions. We have the technology to reduce our use of fossil fuels, be more renewable. And I would encourage you all to go out there and show your stripes. The climate stripes are a simple set of visuals which represent how the climate has changed over the last 150 years. And what you can see is those colours change from mainly blues early on to mainly reds nowadays, highlighting that rapid warming of our climate. So these graphics have been used all over the world to talk about how our climate is changing and to start conversations in a whole range of different areas. We want to use the stripes to inspire people to act. We can choose to reduce emissions, stabilise the rise in global temperatures and minimise the impacts in the future. That is down to us as individuals and society. And so we can take those decisions. We know the solutions and we just need to have the will to act and enact those solutions. Thank you for being involved in these important discussions about climate change.
Come on to talk about that partnership a bit later on. But I want to start off, and I think this launches us into sort of the purpose of the stripes and how they work. Climate scientists have been telling us for a long time now the world's warming up. Yet we often hear this, and I think you can see why. The last month, May, early June, didn't feel that warm at all. In fact, it's felt pretty chilly in the UK until the last couple of days when summer finally arrived. So explain the difference then between that kind of regional temperature variation and the global stripes.
Well, I think it shows that we have short memories, right? So May was, the warmest May on record for the UK and for the globe. We did have a few cool days at the start of June, but that's not actually very unusual. It was similarly cold in 2019, in 2015. We just have short memories, and we particularly in June, we do often get cold weather. But I think what the stripes tell us and show us is that although how we experience the weather in one place over a few days does not tell us the big picture about what's going on globally across the planet. And
so we've got the global picture here, which is, it couldn't be clearer.
Yes.
We are seeing a genuine and undeniable trend towards a very much hotter present and remind us how far this particular part goes back.
So we have 174 stripes here, starting in 1850 on the left, 2023 on the right, one stripe per year, coloured by the global temperature in that particular year. And of course, they change from mainly blues to mainly reds, highlighting that rapid warming over the last 50 years.
But to make that point about variability, let's bring up the UK stripes now, because it tells a slightly different picture that I think speaks to the point that we're making.
So here in the UK, the UK has warmed as well. It's warmed by about 1.5 degrees. over the last 130, 140 years or so. But there's more variation from year to year because we live in a part of the world where the weather is just very variable. We get hot periods and cold periods. But even on the scale of the UK and in Reading or wherever you happen to be in the UK, this trend is unmistakable. We can easily see the trend to warmer temperatures, even though we'll occasionally get colder periods, maybe even a colder year sometimes. But what we see, different countries showing the same pattern, showing this overall warming over the last 150 years or so.
Which is really, really clear in that image. That's the signal in the climate system that the stripes elegantly show. But we're also here to talk about them as a means of communication, as an entity in their own right, as a, I don't know, work of art, I'm beginning to wonder, and we'll come on to that in a second. But let's go back to the beginning. And like a lot of really great stories, this starts with a baby, I've now learned.
Yeah.
So tell us who this baby is and how a blanket went on to inspire the stripes.
Yeah, so back in 2017, a colleague of mine, Professor Ed Hawkins, knitted the blanket you can see up here on the left-hand side. And the reason she knitted the blanket was to give to a colleague who was having a baby.
Right.
And the baby is now 6 years old, wearing the blanket still with pride. But in the knitting community, this proved very, very popular when Ellie put this online.
Right.
The knitting community loves knitting, but they've also knitted the weather for a very long time. People love knitting stripes about the weather every day. They'll knit a few stripes representing what's happened over the last few days in their weather in wherever they happen to live. So Ellie took the idea, well, people do that all the time. Why not do long-term temperature instead? And so we see Ellie's original blanket here in multicolours. It was the wool she had available to her at the time to highlight that change in temperature over the globe.
And you saw that and thought, maybe turn that into a chart. But
yeah,
this was the germ of an idea, just stating, if you'll pardon a baby pun, it wasn't the first graphic you came up with, the stripes. The first time I saw a really striking graphic that distilled the incredible changes we're seeing in global averages was this climate spiral. Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit more about the climate spiral.
So I came into climate science a little bit late. I was originally an astrophysicist, and I came into climate science after my PhD. And I had a...
Perhaps you'll forgive my rude comments about meteorologists then, so carry on.
And I recognised that one of the reasons I did that was because I felt that climate science was more relevant. It's very, there's very, very important policy implications of what we say. And we need to communicate that very clearly. And so I always had a desire that we need to communicate very clearly the facts of what's been going on to our planet. And part of communication is experimenting. You experiment with different ideas to see what works. And one of those experiments was this spiraling graphic showing how global temperatures have changed since 1850 to the present day. It was an animation, and I think that's important. It's moving, it provides interest for people to hook onto. So I made this in 2016, didn't think anything of it, put it online on a Friday afternoon, and suddenly, everyone go, oh, this is amazing. And everyone could latch onto it for some reason, and it proved very popular.
Absolutely. And it illustrated to me, and I remember putting it on TV shortly after you put it on Twitter that first time. I think that's where I first saw it, because it irons out that variability that we're talking about before. It makes the annual variability, the change between year and year, distills it out and makes it very clear the pattern that's going on. And also, by putting 1.5 and 2, illustrates the degree of warming that we're experiencing, and that really struck out. But it went on, it went global, didn't it? It ended up at the Rio Olympics in 2016, I believe.
So a few months later, it was the Rio Olympics, and I was at home watching the opening ceremony on TV.
Yeah.
I'd been to a popular make-it-yourself furniture store that evening, and bought some flat pack furniture and was building, I think it was a shelves or something that evening, watching the opening ceremony, and that came on the screen. And I think I dropped the screwdriver, and my wife came running in saying, "What's happened? What's going on?" And that was on the screen.
It's part of the opening ceremony.
Yeah, 1 billion people watching.
And you had no idea that this was. How do you feel about that? Was it appropriation of your idea, your royalty?
It was a bit of a shock, I have to say. No, I mean, obviously there's a lot of secrecy around what's going to be on the opening ceremony. So no, I wasn't told in advance.
You're getting the credit for it now. Let's put it that way. So what happened next? After this, you were invited to speak at the Hay Festival. Now, I don't know this story, so I'm curious to find out why was that a kind of pivotal moment in the origins of the stripes?
So the Hay Festival is a very famous book literary festival here in the UK. And in 2018, they decided to partner some artists with some environmental scientists to put on some joint events at Hay. And so I was partnered with an amazing children's author and poet called Nicola Davies. And we were there to put on a joint event. Nicola wrote some beautiful poems about what climate science and what was going on. And I was there to talk about the science at that event. And I just wanted a very clear, simple way of communicating the reality of what had happened to our climate. And, you know, obviously I recalled the blanket and I'd been thinking about those ideas for about a year, I think. And suddenly it just sort of clicked that this was going to be an effective way of showing things very simply. Again, I wasn't sure it was going to work. Right? It's very simple. It's just coloured stripes. But I went to the event at Hay and I put it on the screen and I could instantly see people go, whoa. And, you know, it's just by one glance.
Let's bring the stripes up. And that was the inspiration that ignited people's imagination. But what actually are they seeing? Talk us through it. Talk us through the choice of colours as well, because I think that was really...
Yeah, so, I mean, the choice of colours is really important. Right? Blue is intuitively cold and red is intuitively hot.
Yeah.
And so that is, I think, really a really important part of this. But it prompts people to ask questions. You see it and you go, what's that all about? And it instantly gets your brain thinking about what it is. And then as soon as you're told what it is, you go, ah, I get it. Because it is just showing the change in temperature over the last 170 years. You know, and our brains process images far faster than they process text. And so that is why I think it's so effective.
It draws you in
before
you know the story. So I'm thinking as an academic, you'd be expected to put an X and Y axis on here, and some labels and some extra bits. You know, this wouldn't get published in Nature as a figure in a scientific paper, but it's as a communication tool. It's about that visual recognition, I guess.
It is, and I remember being asked. I went on a data visualization podcast, you know, and they said, "How did you know you were supposed to break the rules and it would be so effective?" And I said, "I didn't know the rules, right?
Yeah,
because I've not studied data visualization specifically, but you know that they would say you need an axis, you need numbers, you need labels. But it turns out if you strip all of that away, people can just look at it, and as soon as you tell them what it is, they can understand it. Absolutely. And it's one tool in our toolbox of how we communicate. It's not the only answer, right? This doesn't show all the details, you know, the uncertainties, all of the fine details that we scientists would worry about. So we need a whole range of tools, and this is one of them.
But what you realised quite early on, I think, and that's why we're here, it did start that conversation. It got people asking the question, and if there's someone there to help unpack it for them and explain it, that's where it comes to. Back to the story of the stripes then, you had a great response at Hay, and at the same time, you put this on Twitter.
Yeah.
Is that right? What happened then?
So while I was designing things for Hay, I decided to, again, experiment and put them online. And this was the first tweet, I think, that showed the stripes about that same time. And again, it proved very popular. Everyone suddenly could latch onto it, and lots of various articles in the media discussing why this was so effective. And so it just proved really, really popular. And I think it stopped people scrolling.
Yeah,
we'll all scroll through social media, but this, as soon as you see it, you go, well, what's that
about?
Yeah.
What is it about? It hooks you in.
Yeah.
And I'm also interested, and I'm going slightly off script here, but there was at that time in climate science, I think were we still in that period of cooling? I think there was a bit of discussion, certainly in other parts of the media, about whether climate change had stopped. And this provided a very significant reminder of a trend, the signal behind the noise in our climate.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Now, people start to notice it. It starts to get picked up. It appears on the side of a Tesla, I believe.
Yeah, so this was the first example, actually, where I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, we're onto something here.
Yeah.
So there's a chap in Minnesota who saw the stripes online and decided all by himself, I'm going to wrap my Tesla in the stripes. And so he did, and he sent me a photo saying, look what I've done. And I went, brilliant, that's fantastic. And he said, well,
that's quite cool as well.
You would have thought it was, yeah, it is. And he said, I'm taking it to a car show next week.
Yeah.
And so he wrote back to me after, said, I've had more conversations about climate change at that one afternoon at the car show than I've had in the rest of the year put together. And it's purely because people at the car show came up to him and said, "What have you done to your car? Why, why the hell does it look like that?" And so that led naturally into him saying, "Well, this is what it represents. This is the warming of our planet." And they wouldn't have come over to him probably if they knew what it was to start with, or if it was more complicated. And so it opened doors and allowed that conversation to happen very naturally.
And around this time, it's getting picked up there. It starts to make its presence felt on the telly. First in America, or certainly in America, weather presenters start picking it up. Now, obviously an interested crowd, they're meteorologists too. Here we go.
So this is Jeff Berardelli, who is a weather forecaster in Florida. And again, he saw it online, and he had been trying to weave climate change into his daily weather forecasts, provide that information in a neutral way, as a trusted voice about weather and climate. And he saw this, I'm gonna do something with this. And so he encouraged all of his TV weather forecaster friends across the US and across the world to say, right, we're going to do this in a coordinated way. We're going to have a day where we start talking about climate a lot more, and we're going to use this very simple graphic, and I'm going to get a time aid and some mugs, and we're going to talk about it all on the same day. And so a group of them got together and did it.
And the significance of that sort of coordinated daily event, Mets Unite, I think they called it.
Yes.
And this is it.
Yeah. So this was the first year, I think, on the left-hand side. There's, we had about, I think there are 10 countries involved that first year with lots of weather forecasters. There have been many more in other years ever since then. But again, they are voices we hear every day. And people trust them to talk about the weather.
This is the thing. And I'm also thinking at the time, and I don't want to politicize our conversation too much, but this is 2 years into Donald Trump's administration. The climate scientists in America were really feeling the presence of that. They were concerned about some of the way, not particularly sympathetic leaning towards climate was being represented in the press. And here you have the most trusted sort of presenters in that area rallying around your image.
Yeah, and that coordinated approach was really important, I think, to come together to show that it wasn't political. This is just the reality of what's happening.
Yeah. Now it's around this time, I'm very proud to say, July, so a couple of months after you put it up, I got involved in the story because I'd also seen the stripes. I recognised it as a really impressive, powerful vision. I wanted to come down and talk to you about it. This when I was working at ITV News. And it's interesting, I think, gets us into it. I remember we're standing in front of this screen. We were reporting on a heat wave that we were having in 2018. It'd been remarkably hot. And I asked you the question, if the heat wave was due to climate change. Yeah. And you said to me, I don't think a politician would do, but definitely a professor would, and said, that's the wrong question. Yeah. What you should have asked is, how is climate change affecting this event? And it really worked for us because it helps me show that natural variability, but the undeniable trend that's going on. Yeah, that's basically the heart of it.
And exactly, and that point about climate change is affecting every event that we have. So every heat wave is now hotter because we live in a warmer world. The heat wave hasn't necessarily been caused by it, but it has been made hotter, which means the impacts are far greater. So the consequences of each heat wave are becoming more damaging because we're living in a warmer world. And so it allows us to talk about those issues much more clearly, yes.
Yeah, and for me as someone in the media, I'm constantly asking, is it due to climate change? That's what my bosses want the answer to. I struggle to communicate it, so I rely on people like Ed. But when you've got a nice, colourful chart to show them, look, guys, it's something that they can understand without feeling like they're being lectured to by someone who is interested in statistics. It wasn't just us that picked up on it. Guardian, Economist, other papers. I guess they were seeing the same thing in this as well.
They were, and it's just an intriguing image, I think, which you can put it on the front page, and it looks really unusual, and I think that's part of its appeal, is that you can put it on the front page like this, and people will go, oh, what's that all about, on the front page. And so that, I think that's a very natural way of drawing people in to learning more about it. Yeah,
and showing that very powerful trend. And then, sure enough, it's in the media. It starts bleeding into other parts of our culture in really quite unexpected ways. So here it is, Reading Festival. Yeah. So 2019.
You just can't stop looking at it. I think that was it. But so soon after this, we were contacted by this rock band, Enter Shikari. I'd never heard of them. Many people maybe have in the audience. But they said, we talk about various issues, as rock bands, do on stage. And they said, we would like to talk about climate a lot more. And we saw this, can we use it? And so they had some gigs in Germany, and then they came to Reading. And this is from Reading in 2019 on the main stage at Reading Festival, one of the biggest festivals in the country. And there it was, giant size up there. And the lead singer, Rao Reynolds, talked, at quite length after the song Juggernauts, where they use this to talk about climate. And so to bring it home to the fans that are there and people watching at home on TV, what it was all about. And it's a location where you would not normally talk about climate change. And I think that's where the power of the stripes is. It allows those conversations to happen where you would not normally expect to have them.
You achieved rock star status by this, but did you get backstage pass? Did you show up in your leather jacket?
I was away, so I wasn't actually there. I did get to see them in Glasgow at COP26.
Fantastic.
When they played a gig there. So I did see them, but not there.
That's
sadly.
From rock and pints and, well, it looks really nice, that weather, actually. It's usually worse at festivals. Yeah. Then it gets to the world of fashion.
Yeah. So again, it's somewhere a climate scientist wouldn't normally end up on the catwalk at London Fashion Week. But no, again, so this is a fashion designer called Lucy Taman, who works in London. And she's always been a specialist in sustainable fashion and sustainable clothing. And again, she just talked about how she was on social media and just saw the graphic, and it stopped her scrolling, and she wanted to find out more about it, and she contacted and said, can I make some dresses, and some outfits from this? And we said, yes, of course. How can we help? And so this is one of the dresses that appeared in that London Fashion Week show. And fashion is not normally a place, again, where you would talk about climate change. It's often assumed to be a bad industry for the climate, but here it was, in one of the biggest places you can talk about fashion, being front and center.
But at the same time, a very powerful industry in which to communicate messages, exactly. And that's what's happening here.
Yes.
So then, from fashion to the catwalk to the football stadium, we've got them in the world of sport too. Not long after.
Yeah. So Reading Football Club, big part of the town here. And the university and the football club talk to each other quite a lot. And the football club, wanted to do more on their sustainability side. They recognised that sport has an enormous part to play in showing people that we can be more sustainable. They were having conversations with the university, and they suddenly saw the stripes in the background of someone's Zoom call or something, and said, "Oh, what's that all about?" And suddenly, from that one little spark, they said, "Well, let's just put it on our kit." And we went, okay, yeah. And so, then it appeared on their kit a couple of seasons ago. So they use the stripes for Berkshire. So we have the stripes for the local town. So they're talking about how climate change has affected us here locally. And that's really important.
And that's another key thing about the stripes are completely adaptable. But for whether you've got weather record, you can do stripes.
And you can talk about how people have experienced it in that particular location. Yeah.
Now, we saw the video at the beginning. Motor racing comes knocking at the door.
Yeah.
So tell me about Formula E racing and how they got involved in stripes.
So, again, this is the Formula E team called Envision, who were the world champions last year. And they've always, again, been pushing the fact that, we need to develop electric cars, and part of that is testing it in very high octane environments. In a racing environment, you can develop new technology to improve the technology to build electric cars. And so they came to us and said, can we put the stripes on the car next season? And so, again, we had a conversation, and I went to their Race Against Climate Change event, and they are encouraging their fans to make choices and make different actions to reduce their own emissions. And so it was a very natural partnership for us.
Was that you in the helmet? I was hoping it was a stig moment. You were going to pull it off, and it would be.
It wasn't me. It was one of the drivers in the helmet. I was.
It didn't let you behind the wheel.
No, sadly not. I'd love
to.
Awesome.
Just decorate the car. Yeah. I like it. Yeah. Other sports have embraced the stripes too. Cycling for climate.
Yes. So this is an organisation in the Netherlands. So today, 2,500 people in the Netherlands were running and cycling around the Netherlands wearing stripy outfits like this again. And so they were cycling and running along the zero sea level contour in the Netherlands to try and highlight the fact that sea levels are rising and this could potentially swallow parts of the country. Okay. And so they're choosing their route to raise the issue about how it's affecting them in that particular country.
And then there's running, the original marathon, all about spreading a message. Other runners are following that tradition too. Let's now watch a short clip from last year's Running Out of Time relay, and then we're going to talk a bit more about that because there's coming home.
Our climate relay.
Relay.
A relay
Relay. 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 A massive relay
involving more than 5,000 people that
crisscross the length of the country,
designed to raise awareness about the health of our planet
and inspire action.
The baton is travelling 2,661 kilometres through 50 major towns and cities.
The route from Ben Nevis in Scotland to Big Ben in Westminster also takes in locations in Wales.
Stopping at different places that are showcasing ways to turn net zero.
Combining sport with a message about the dangers of climate change.
We're hoping more of us will get on two wheels. Trust me, it's not as difficult as it might look.
record temperatures. Record temperatures.
We must seize this opportunity.
Record temperatures.
We must seize this opportunity.
Record temperatures.
We must seize this opportunity and act now.
Amazing. Tell us a bit more about this.
Well, so we have the baton here,
it's right here. It's come to us.
Yes. So yeah, this organisation, Running Out of Time, have done 2 or 3 of these relays now, and so we've got some of the runners here today. So they're running this year from Ben Nevis to Big Ben, crisscrossing the country. They were in London this morning at Lord's Cricket Ground. The stripes were on this big screen at Lord's Cricket Ground this morning, and they have cycled here from Lord's this evening to be here tonight.
And it's incredible outreach as well. I think they presented the stripes to the Speaker of the House.
Yes.
In the past. We've got that happening.
Yeah.
Keeping those parliamentarians aware of what's going on. Yes. You've mentioned they've been at Lord's, and yes, we're delighted. The relay team are here. Can we give them a round of applause? Tired legs. They've temporarily laid their baton to rest on the desk in front of us. I was going to pick it up, but it might be a bit sweaty, so I'll leave it there to carry on. And obviously, best of luck. Yeah, they're going to be carrying on. They'll be at Parliament on the 4th of July. Apparently, that's a bit of a coincidence, guys, isn't it? That it happens to be polling day. Hopefully, you can make even more of an impact, but you didn't know that, I guess, when you started the race, because none of us knew we were going to have an election that soon. Now, look, let's just trip through some of the other locations. It's not just Lord's that we've seen the stripes, quite a few other places around the world. Where's this?
So this is a bridge in Leipzig in Germany, and a group in Leipzig decided they want to paint this bridge with the stripes. It's pretty large, as you can see, and they crowdfunded the money to do it. So people put their hands in their own pockets to raise the money to buy all the necessary paint and everything else, and it was painted by volunteers, and it's a pedestrian and cycling bridge in Leipzig, and you can actually see this from space. So if it's extraordinary.
I'm assuming this will be the Leipzig stripe.
I think these are the global stripes.
That's the global stripes.
It is,
okay,
yeah.
but it is labelled in this particular case, so people who maybe haven't come across it before get the picture pretty quickly. And what's going on?
There's a big football match in Leipzig tonight, one of the UEFA matches, and the stripes will be on one of the screens in the fan zone in Leipzig tonight. Partly because of the efforts that these guys have put in.
Yeah, and show your stripes. The White Cliffs.
Yes. So this was last year. Yeah, we took inspiration, I think, from trying to do something really big and project the stripes onto famous landmarks, so we could talk about climate change with a very visual image. And so the White Cliffs are a perfect canvas to project this. And so an organisation helped us out to project the UK stripes here in this example onto the White Cliffs of Dover, and it's just a very striking, powerful image that we can use to start conversations.
I can't think of a more naturally suited UK canvas on which to put it on as well. Wind turbine.
Yes.
This was a cool one.
Yeah, so we did this 2 days ago. So, it's just trying to talk about solutions as well. We can talk about the problems, but we also need to talk about solutions. And so this is a sort of time-lapse image projecting the stripes onto a wind turbine in the Cotswolds. So again, another very powerful image to highlight the solutions we can adopt.
And if you were in London last night, the BT Tower.
Yes. So
a stripe.
Yeah, this was the BT Tower last night. Giant projection. And there's some videos of this online you can find as well. It's again just another striking, powerful image for people seeing it there in person, but also talk about it the next day.
I'd say I cycled past BT Tower about 8 o'clock last night on my way home from work, but of course it wasn't dark yet, so I didn't actually see this until after I was tucked up in bed. Unfortunately, came down here today.
Tonight, the Tower of London is going to be lit up with the stripes. So if anyone's near the Tower of London tonight, go along and you can watch that happen.
Amazing. And we've got other landmarks too. The Tate Modern, I believe.
Tate Modern,
yeah.
So so it's not just the UK. So we've got the Tate Modern on the left, but we've also got the CN Tower in Toronto, a couple of bridges in the US, and the top one, right, I think, is a light show in Copenhagen. So yeah, lots of places all over the world. And there's some bridges in Brisbane last night in Australia also lit up to talk about climate change in different places.
So not just buildings, cities, the world of politics and global figures, they've also embraced the stripes as well.
Yeah. So this is a US senator wearing a stripy badge, and lots of senators actually wore this badge and the stripes during a State of the Union address. The big event for the annual event that the American politicians have. Yep. Again, highlight the fact that they were concerned about this issue and it needed more attention.
All the way to the Vatican too.
Yes.
This is a big moment, surely.
Yeah. So yeah, an Italian organisation, activists decided, can we do this? And they said, would you mind? And we said, yeah, if you can pull it off, brilliant. And so there they are presenting a stole to the Pope last year.
Amazing. Yeah. No sainthood yet, though.
Sorry?
No sainthood yet.
No.
Okay. Well, maybe maybe that'll come after the MBE. Let's see. And of course, this young woman, she made an extremely huge contribution to the youth movement around climate.
Yes.
She chose the stripes for the cover of her book.
Yes. I mean, yeah, it's an amazing, striking cover, an amazing book to read as well. Also, lots of important messages written by lots of scientists in that book. Yeah, and very, very delighted that she chose the stripes for the cover.
Now, what is it? Again, we're coming back to the stripes, their power as a communication device for leaders and for politicians and for activists who are using them to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just that it's facts, right? We're not talking about the future necessarily. We're talking about what's already happened, and it's billions of individual measurements of a thermometer all compiled together into a single image, covering the last couple of 100 years. And it's not trying to make any political point. It's just there representing what's happened to allow us to talk about the risks that we face in the future. What's already happened, how we're already experiencing climate change today. And so it's just trying to present that message and make it real to anyone who sees it.
And it's about the proportion of the image also that's red. It tells us about how really the situation is a recent phenomenon and it is only getting warmer.
Yes, exactly right. That change from blue to red happens very quickly, highlighting the very rapid change that we're seeing because of our burning of fossil fuels.
And we talked about this earlier. They are tunable, localizable. We saw that with the Reading image. How many versions of the stripes are there now, and what's the importance of that, I suppose?
So we've made graphics for every country around the world, and so you can go onto our showyourstripes.info website, pick your country, download your own graphic for wherever you happen to live, and we've also got hundreds of cities as well. Where we've got the big cities, we can also make graphics for each city. And so that allows people to take those graphics and use them to talk about how climate change is affecting them personally, and to talk to their friends and their family and their colleagues about how climate change is affecting them already as well. And so making it local and making it real and talking about how you're already experiencing a warming world is critical.
If you can't quite make this out in the audience, what we're looking at is 1905 to 2015, and these are the different continents with their land surface temperatures averages on there, but you can see the overall trend is undeniable. Interesting, the variability in Europe, it's really clear at that point you were saying earlier about how our weather is.
Nowhere is untouched. Every continent is warming, every country is warming, the experience is different in different places, but it's the same trend everywhere.
Now, we've been having a very positive conversation about the stripes, but it hasn't all been plain sailing. What are the biggest criticisms you get as a climate scientist who's contributed this to?
I mean, the main criticism is, well, it's too simple, right? There's no numbers on it, right?
Yeah.
And scientists, we want numbers, we love numbers, we love details, and this doesn't have any of that. And so, it maybe obscures some of those very interesting details, but it allows that simple message to be heard. And that's why this is, one way of communicating. It's not the only way we should communicate, because we need all of those interesting details as well for different audiences. But this reaches one particular audience, in a very simple way. I mean, the other issue that we have is we start to think about, well, what's going to happen in the future? What are our choices for the future? And then you suddenly realize, well, I've run out of colors. Where do I go from dark red?
Red doesn't get any darker.
Exactly. And so we have to rethink how we then talk about the future. And so we do have versions where we think about the future, but we've had to rethink it to talk about how it works for the future.
Just one other question I want to throw in here, because this is, I think, relevant. I mean, the conversation we've had, the global popularity of this image, the message has got across. This has been a very big part of doing that. The other issue we face now is climate change. The reality of warming is pretty well accepted, even amongst people who for a long time were trying to pretend that it wasn't happening. What role, where do you go from here in the fact that, the message is out there? Really, the question is now about what we do about it, how much we commit to it. Can the stripes play a role in that, or do we need another device to talk about some of the really tough choices society's now facing that action?
I think we need lots of ways of doing that. We need to tell more stories about the future, about the risks that we face and the opportunities we have if we move into a more sustainable world. So we need to tell those positive stories about the world we can live in with cleaner air, for example, saving millions of lives if we have cleaner air by taking the cuts to vehicles. Emissions, for example, will clean up our air enormously and save lives. So that there are positive stories we can tell and we need to tell. But we also need to highlight the fact that we do have a choice. We are the generation here which has a set of difficult choices to make about the future. And the choices we make over the next decade or two will determine the climate for generations to come. The stripes do not go back to being blue. Right?
Yeah.
So because as we continue to add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, the world will continue to warm until we stop emitting. And then temperatures will stabilize, and we'll have to live with the consequences of wherever we manage to stabilize temperatures. And so every ton of carbon dioxide avoided emitting matters, because it eventually lowers where we ultimately end up. And so we try and talk about those choices between rapid action. If we choose to take rapid action, get to net zero quite quickly, we can stabilize temperatures at a level which is consistent with the Paris Agreement or we delay actions, we keep burning fossil fuels, and we end up in a world which is vastly different and it makes life very uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Now, let's bring us back to Show Your Stripes Day. That is today. That's why we're here, to celebrate this. And we've got a few new things that are going on the stripes. What are your hopes of what will happen going forward? What's next in the story of the stripes?
Well, we want to continue to build partnerships, with anyone who wants to use the stripes. The offer is there, open to encourage people to use them. We want people to share them, obviously, and talk about them, start conversations, prompt actions, talk about the positive steps that we can all make. We can build those partnerships. And so later this year, Sony Interactive Entertainment are going to launch this climate station, which is an immersive tool on the PlayStation, where you'll be able to go in and explore how our climates are changing and the potential futures, and they're using the stripes as part of that. So that will be launched later this year.
And that's quite a new departure. I mean, gaming is an entirely new avenue and a new sort of group of people that you can access in a different way with the message and engage, potentially massive audience. There's more too.
So this is going to be an immersive experience for people, and it's being developed by lots of us here at the university, partnering with Sony to make sure they're using the right data in the right ways to talk about climate.
Amazing. And a movie?
A movie, yeah, this is exciting. Brand new today, launching. So this is Ozzy, Voice of the Forest, which is a new family animated feature film coming out fairly soon in August. And it's a very lovely story, actually, about an orphan orangutan.
whose forest gets chopped down, and he becomes an influencer online and explores the forest to save the forest and find his family again. But yes, they are using the stripes as part of the discussion about deforestation as part of the movie. It's produced by Leonardo DiCaprio with many famous voices.
Amazing. We've got the trailer, I believe.
We do, yes.
Let's have a look at that.
No big deal, just swing across.
I can make it.
Doubt it. You've probably never been outside these walls, am I right?
I've been living in an orphanage with humans.
Ozzy speaks sign language, and she's a social media influencer.
What happened to her home? I will stop them.
Ozzy! She lost her home and her family to terrible fires.
Sure. How about you just get the monkey to talk?
I am not monkey. I am orangutan. Chance! Do you know this place? My parents could be there.
This is gonna be fun.
You're the only one I know who knows the forest.
For now, at least. Oh, that might be poison.
This was my home. Green Czar is destroying our island. We have to stop it. I can tell the whole world what's happening. Honkus, take us out.
Yeah, baby.
Give it up, Smiley. Hold on.
Oh my gosh! She's so little and soft!
One I could change the world.
Yes.
Fantastic. So from a humble baby blanket to Hollywood in, what is it, six years? Did you ever imagine that when you first put the stripes up on social media?
You know, there's no way you could ever envisage this happening. You know, it's been used in so many places all over the world. It's just inspiring to see so many people take up the concept and take it on themselves to use it in the ways that they find it helpful for them, for their businesses, for their organizations, to spread these important messages.
And you've started that conversation.
Yeah.
We're talking about it here. Everyone who sees these stripes, who hasn't seen them before, will ask that question about what they are if they're interested enough, and let's hope they are. How do you hope that the message will translate into the action that scientists like you are so right in reminding us we need to start accelerating now?
Yeah, I mean, we have enormous hopes for the future. We have to prompt people to act. We need governments, obviously, to act. We need businesses and industry to make difficult choices. But that will require society as a whole to understand the problem and to realize we all need to act as well. And so I hope that by having these conversations, we can encourage people to talk about climate more than we do at the moment. We talk to our friends and our family and our colleagues about the actions we are all taking and normalize that, normalize driving an electric car because it's fun as well as helping the environment, having our heat pumps, maybe changing our diet slightly, cycling a bit more, saving ourselves money by doing many of these things as well. And the more we can make it part of everyday conversation, the more we normalize the changes that we can all make and encourage our politicians and our businesses to be braver.
And I think at the time right now, let's take it the UK, but I think this is the situation we see in lots of other developed countries at the moment after cost of living crisis, inflationary crises. This is becoming a more polarized argument than it has been for a decade, maybe, or more. The stripes are possibly more important than ever. And maybe to try and take some of the, dare I say it, heat out of that argument, right? It's become polarized.
Yeah, and they just tell you what's happened already, right? And then that allows you to have the conversation about what's going to happen to the future and the choices we all need to make. Because if we don't make those difficult choices, we're going to look back in 30 years' time and we're going to regret not acting faster.
Absolutely. Right, we're going to close it there, Ed, for a second and take some questions because there's so many of you here. I hope you've come armed with questions. We're also taking questions online. So if you are watching online, you do have the opportunity to ask a question. We'd like to hear from you as well. We've got some roving mics out there. Have I got any hands yet? While you think about it, I've got a question. Oh no, we've got some hands. Oh my goodness. I'm going to take two at a time. Gentleman at the back there, because you're closest to the mic. I've seen your hand, but you're right at the front from the mic. So I'm going to get the gentleman there and the gentleman in the middle as well. If you get his question as well after that one. Comes to you next.
So as a resident of Reading myself, born and bred, I have to say I'm very proud of the stripes, and it's always a pleasure to talk about them, as thankfully my company have adopted them. So we get many questions of it, and I'm always very proud to talk about it. But as everyone here, what would be the small thing that we could take away ourselves to actually make a big change?
Thank you. Hold on for answering. I want to take a second question. Gentleman there had your hand up in the middle. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation today. I've not come across this before, but I thought it was amazing. One question I've got is, do you think that the solution to the climate change agenda is going to be imposed or negotiated?
Good one. Right, let's deal with those. So what actions
Can we all take
locally?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a business, if you're in your office environment or business environment, you can encourage your own business to make different choices about where you get your energy from, for example, or sustainability choices in the office at work. At home, we can all make different choices. We can all, for example, cut down the amount of beef and lamb in particular that we all eat at home. We can make different choices about how we travel around. We can all make different choices about how we power our homes, how we heat our homes, and so on. So we can all make these choices, but it is important to talk about it and tell everybody why you are making those choices, because it inspires other people to act. And I think the important thing is that the reason that we encourage so much of this engagement in different environments and different communities is because we tend to live in tribes and we trust people that have similar interests to us. And so that is why, football fans talking about it in the stadium, sitting next to each other, even if you don't know them, you've got a similar common interest. And so that is very powerful to have that conversation in that environment. The same with the fashion and the rock music. These are environments where you have a similar interest. And so we can have those conversations.
The second question was about whether it would be imposed upon us or not.
Yeah, I mean, many of the choices that we can make will make things cheaper, right? For example, we are going to build, more wind turbines, more solar power around the country. That's going to give us energy security because we're making our energy here. So some of the things like that, where we get our energy from, will need big organizations, governments, and so on. I suspect that there will be carrots and sticks adopted to make these changes happen. But I think these changes are necessary, right? We have to realize that if we don't act, there are bigger costs than if we do act, right? So that we don't have a choice between, it's often framed as these things are going to cost us lots of money, right? And they are a cost, but it's an investment, because if we don't make those costs, it will cost us more in the long run from the impacts that we will see.
And I think something that we've certainly seen lacking from the debate recently, certainly in the UK political arena, and I've got to be careful because I work for an Ofcom regulated broadcaster, but from all sides of the political spectrum, is a bit of a discourse about how much it's going to cost, how much an imposition it might be, how much of a burden on either taxpayers or bill payers a lot of these changes will be. Less often we hear about the opportunities of it, and you talk to any economist who studied the climate situation, well, there are economic opportunities, even in lifestyle changes. Talk to your GP, would probably tell you it wouldn't be such a bad idea to eat a little bit less meat anyway. No one's going to, well, I can't imagine in the UK we'll live in a society where you'll be told what you have to eat, but the choices you make aren't necessarily ones that are going to leave you worse off. I think that's part of the argument.
Yeah, and I think, we need to sort of get away from this, that we all need to be perfect, right? We can all be better. Right? And if everybody gets better, that is what we need to achieve, not everyone to be perfect straight away.
Fantastic. Let's go for a couple more questions. There was a lady at the front and lady in the middle. I'm sorry, and I'll come back to you guys. I've seen you two over there. So this lady first, and someone else had up there. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Hello, I'm from Team Aussie, the film. So thank you for showing that. It was amazing. Thank you for developing the stripes. So it's really interesting that people have picked this up, and it's almost like an organic marketing campaign without being a marketing campaign. But I think it's so powerful, and what you can do with the stripes, the way that you can design things, influence things. I mean, at what point is Reading University going to kind of get like a wicked marketing firm or like spend? Because in a way, it would take a couple of maybe £1 million or 2 million quid. I don't know.
It doesn't need one. It's got Professor Ed Hawkins.
Yeah, exactly. But do you have discussions about that? Because I know that copyright wise, you're saying use it, just go and use it.
Yeah.
You don't always want people to use and abuse your brand. Is anyone like the brand guardian? Are you worried about it not being used properly and then maybe spending more money on becoming a kind of stripes marketing machine?
Hold your on, Steph. There was a woman in the middle there with your hand up. Yeah, thank you very much.
Hi, you've talked a lot about the deep importance of having conversations and the fact that the very purpose of those conversations is action. And you've mentioned the fact that governments are a really critical part of that. And we sit here days away from an election, and when you've been asked about the choices that people can make, you've mentioned an awful lot of individual choices. You haven't mentioned voting. And you have both said you don't want to be political. Is there a danger that not wanting to be political will be on the planet's tombstone?
So we'll start with
Marketing first, then politics.
So yeah, we have very deliberately made a choice to make the graphics freely available for anyone to use anywhere in the world. You know, as a very deliberate choice from the beginning, because that is why it works so organically. And that's been the right choice, I think. But you know, we haven't needed to spend, so we haven't earned any money from it, right? We're not making money from this. We're just want the graphic used because we think it's helpful. And so we haven't spent millions of pounds on marketing because people have come to us to build partnerships. You know, there have been 1 or 2 partnerships. Companies, organizations have come to us and said, we would like to partner to develop something together. And there've been a couple of times we've actually said, no, this is not right for us because we don't think you're using this in quite the right way. And so that is very important decisions that we've taken. And but most of the, the ones that we have done, we've been very happy with, and it's been effective as a partnership. And that's been very valuable. Yes, voting for sure. We should all vote with climate in mind, for sure. And I don't think, the vast majority, maybe all the political parties are being very honest with us about the scale of the risks and the challenges we face. And I would like to see much more discussion about climate change in this election discussion. It's basically been absent so far, and I think that's a real travesty. And we need the politicians to be honest. And the scientists to be honest about the very challenging risks that we face in the future if we don't act.
I think another thing I just thought I'd add to that, it's been notably absent from this most recent election campaign, unlike the one before, interestingly. Attitudes, and I think this is partly a political obsession at the moment, quite understandably, because of a cost of living crisis and inflation. Everyone wants to talk about money and costs, and net zero is going to involve some investment. It needn't necessarily be a huge burden on the state. A lot of investment is queuing up to come from the private sector, but it is notably absent at the moment, and I think that is regrettable. And it's a conversation we're having in newsrooms as well. And I can say that quite apolitically because I think that applies to all parties, with perhaps the exception of a couple of ones who under a climate banner. But the other thing, an important thing to remember, and this was interesting because we looked into this when the Conservatives chose to change their stance, shall we say, on the climate around October of last year. You look at the polling of the average UK voter, about 75%, I think, is what the polling data shows, want climate action. It is something that politicians, I think, slightly misunderstand. There's a lot more appetite amongst the electorate for action on climate change than the politicians' statements might lead you to believe. So that I take some confidence in that. Let us move on. We had a couple of questions over on this side. Yes, the lady there right next to the aisle, and there's somebody in the middle of that row there. Yes, thank you.
Thanks for a really informative talk, and the emphasis on a sort of non-confrontational, non-political. I wondered what your thoughts are of Just Stop Oil and the impact those kind of demonstrations are having when it seems to be presented in a really negative way. And the response is, I saw a headline, I can't remember, well, we can guess which newspaper it was, that just lock them all up. Is that anti-productive to the conversations that you're trying to have?
Thank you. That's a very topical question. And the gentleman there at the end of that row there, thank you.
Thank you very much. And then, yeah, this message is quite powerful, across a different area now. But it looks like now, it's even close to the fashion. But the problem is the fashion. Fashion comes and goes. And now, after COP26 and Kyoto and Paris, IPCC conference, now it's getting less and less now. Is that a kind of like a fashion now? It's starting to dying out. I mean, the question is how we can keep this one as a style rather than the fashion that people talk about a couple of years. We can continue to talk about this on different occasions. Thank you.
Yes, how does it become timeless and not just a fleeting fashion? I like that question. But let's talk about Just Stop Oil first.
I mean, I think the fact that these people are risking their freedom to go and make protests, I think is incredibly powerful, right? I'm not sure I fully agree with all of the choices about the locations at which they make their protests, but it is very powerful to see people risking their freedoms to make such very dramatic statements about this issue, and it shows the passion and very understandable passion for this issue. I think non-violent protests have worked very effectively for other issues in the past, and I hope that they will have some positive influence on the discussion at the moment.
Yeah, it's tricky for me. I'm given my day job, I have to be sort of staunchly apolitical and not come down on sides, but I think I will reflect the views of what I've heard from people that I've interviewed around these things and other speakers. I think there are definitely those within the environment movement, within the climate movement, who think extreme actions, if the targets aren't right, can only further polarize the debate and unfortunately maybe add fuel to those who want to argue that action on climate is some kind of extremist position, when in fact, as Ed has abundantly showed, not just with the stripes, but also about cost of living, about efficiencies and our health, there are so many opportunities to come from climate. It should be a normal conversation. It shouldn't be a radical position at all. It's total common sense. So I think the voices that argue, they're picking the wrong targets, they're turning people against us, I think there is some validity in that. Just interestingly, I was at Just Stop Oil protest where they were blocking roads, and I was asking people queuing up in the traffic behind, what do you think? And I was expecting to have people spitting and screaming at me and complaining. And what really struck me was the number of people who were taking it, but pretty much all of them said, I don't disagree with their desire for action. I want something to happen about climate change. They're just going about it the wrong way. It's quite a common viewpoint. But what was actually quite heartening, most people want to see change. But it is also true, let's face it, you look back through our history, some of the most difficult transitions that our society's had to go through in the past, from voting for women to the slave trade, direct action has formed part of that. So it is kind of a phenomenon of our society and a free and democratic society as well. I know that would be my 2 cents. Yep. Now, yes, your question.
What was the question over there?
It was about, you've touched the fashion industry, but is the fashion for action on climate sort of going away? How do we embed it? How do we keep it going as a style? I think as the analogy, and I liked it.
It's not going away, right? We're going to be living with the choices that we make, and we're going to need to be making some very radical changes to how society works for the next decades, right? And so it can't be a fleeting fashion. It has to be something we commit to for decades. And it's important, I think, that we have to set the direction of travel. I think consistency about policy allows businesses and governments to take those choices and go in the one direction. So we need to set long-term policy directions so that everyone can join in and make those decisions. So, yesterday I was speaking at the Global Net Zero Banking Alliance summit that was happening in London, and they were crying out for long-term stable policies so they could make the choices about investing to enable the transition to occur in a fair way, because it's going to need to be fair as well. We can't leave people behind on this transition. We have to ensure that people who may need to change jobs, those jobs opportunities are there for them to move into. It needs to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. And oh, we've got a question or two from our online audience, so we're just going to get those from.
So the first is, at what point is the 1.5 degree Paris target deemed to have been reached? Does this mean the global average temperature has to be above 1.5 degrees for a year or much longer? And how likely are we to go above this target before 2030? And the second question is, given what has been said about the stripes staying red even when we achieve net zero, should we be aiming for a state where human activities result in a net reduction of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere rather than just balancing out emissions?
Yeah, good questions. If you ask me, I think the global temperatures will go above 1.5 degrees. I think that's pretty inevitable at this point. And so it is down to us, our choices about how fast we cut our emissions, about what level we manage to stabilize temperatures at. It's the way that the Paris Agreement specifically is framed. It's not about 1 year going above 1.5. It's about a long-term period being above 1.5 would be deemed to be breaking that agreement. And I think that will probably happen. We do have a need to develop technologies which remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, because there are some emissions that we make now, particularly things like farming and flying, which are actually going to be very hard to stop completely. And so we do need technologies which remove CO2 from the atmosphere and bury it underground. We need to develop that whatever to reach net zero. But that does give us the opportunity to go net negative, which means we're removing more from the atmosphere than we're emitting, which draws down the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which will cool global temperatures. We can't do that very quickly, but we probably can do it if we develop the technologies to gradually bring things down if we go above the Paris Agreement limits. But that would require a lot more development than is currently envisaged and seen.
But just going back to that question, I think I know it's not an exact science, but we are probably going to exceed 1.5 degrees sometime before the end of this decade or early 2030s.
Early 2030s would be my guess.
We're going to overshoot 1.5. That's pretty much unavoidable now. So in fact, that question about how long are we overshot for, how long are we living in that 1.5 degree world or warmer, is really all about how quickly we can go negative, because we will have to, I believe, to get us down back below 1.5 before the end of the century.
I think we know we can get to net zero within a generation, right? I think that there are enough policy and technologies out there for us to achieve that if we choose to do it. And then at that point, we can then think about net negative.
Yeah. And the world is, I think it's not very optimistic, already heading in that direction. You look at renewables deployment in China, you look at what America's doing with the Inflation Reduction Act, you look at where sort of global carbon emissions are going. We're probably at a point of peaking, if not now, soon, and things will start to come down. But the point is, they're not happening anywhere near fast enough.
China is building more renewable energy at the moment than the rest of the world put together. It's extraordinary what they're doing. Yeah.
Great. I've now forgot. I think I addressed both questions at once. Did it? Have we got another online question, or should we go back to the audience? Let's go back to the audience. We'll get a few. I've got two hands up over there, next to the aisle. Thank you. And I can see you two at the back. We'll try and get to you. Are we out of time? Oh, I've just seen my watch. We've got 2 more minutes. Okay.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I really like the video because you put technology at the heart of the sort of solution. I was going to ask, where are you on that nexus of the relationship between productivity, economic growth, and climate action? So you have people who are like zero growthers. You can argue Greta Thunberg is there. She called herself a communist. And then you have people like Bill Gates and most economists who are sort of like, we need high productivity and economic growth to pay for the transition. And we need poor countries in particular to have high economic growth, partly to deal with the issues that are going to emerge from climate change.
Understood. Well, sorry for rushing you. We're just trying to get a couple more questions in before the end. Who was the other person with their hand up there? Thank you, Mary.
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to ask, Willie, you've spoken about political choices, and that's to do with individual responsibility, and you've spoken about individual choices, but the elephant in the room is the huge multinational corporations who control so much of our lives, you know, owning the energy and the oil and the water, for example, in this country. You know, how do we battle against the incredible lobbying power that they have and the hold over governments even?
Yeah, I'll just maybe start with that one. I mean, I think we've been lied to for decades by the fossil fuel companies, right? They knew about this problem back in the 80s and hid it and lied about it. So, you know, I think as individuals, we can choose to spend money with businesses that we think align with our values. And I think, you know, that is becoming more powerful. And I think that's something we can all choose to do. Where we bank, for example, you know, I think that's an interesting one. So yeah, we can all make choices about where we spend our money that will hopefully encourage businesses with more sustainable outlooks to thrive and those who don't not to thrive. And I'm afraid I'm not an economist, I'm afraid, so I'm going to skip the economics question.
I would just say on the corporation side, I think the ones who ignore it as well, if you think about the big commodities businesses, have also a very big part. You were talking about agricultural emissions. We have not seen anything like the progress in that sector that we have in energy generation, for example. I think the writing's on the wall for fossil fuels. But I think the risk that they're exposing themselves to, and I think they're going to wake up to it very shortly, is the global temperature is changing really quickly, and that is going to impact their business and their bottom line. And I think that might, sadly, be the thing that prompts them to change.
We're already seeing insurance companies really struggle to want to insure prices in Florida, for example. And so, you know, these types of extreme weather events causing damage are going to affect companies' bottom lines, and they're going to need to act.
Have we got time for more questions? I'm just going to take a... No, we haven't. We're all out of time. I'm very sorry to those of you in the audience or anyone online who we haven't got to their questions. We are out of time, so it just leaves me to thank Ed so much for this and for the stripes and for bringing this to us this evening. Thanks to all of you for coming, and for everyone online who's been watching. I think this is where change happens. This is the conversation that we need to have and continue to have even more urgently than ever before. And just to say, I think you'll be receiving an email over the next few days, those of you who registered for the event, with a feedback survey for the university and these events. So please do fill that out. And they'll be recording this. If you missed anything or want to watch it again, catching the details on the Reading University YouTube channel, so you can watch it back if you want to, or share it with others. So please do. Thanks very much again for coming, and good night.